Hi, y'all. Before I start, just a very quick announcement. If you bought anything at the wonderful PyLadies auction last night, you need to pick it up at registration during the break right now. I've already picked my tie up. Thank you. So, hi, good morning. I'm Jacob Kaplan-Moss. I'm one of the contributors to Django, and I'm the director of security at Heroku. And when I say thank you, I really mean it. It's hard for me to overstate just how fantastic it is to be up here speaking to you. This is the highlight of my career. This is the apex of everything that I've done, and I'm not exaggerating. This community means more to me than anything in tech in my professional life. I spoiled the punchline there, didn't I? I've been coming here to Pycon for 11 years. This is my 11th Pycon, and this is the 10th anniversary of first getting on stage. I gave my first talk at Pycon in 2005 in Washington, D.C. I gave a talk on AppScript. It was a utility to bridge Apple's Apple scripting framework with Python. Also in 2005, Adrian gave a tech demo of some tools that we were building internally at the newspaper in Lawrence, Kansas, that we were using to build our websites. Well, those tools became Django, and now Django is 10 years old and is used all around the world by thousands of companies in many different industries. I've watched this conference go from 300 people to close to 3,000. I've watched our community explode with new faces and growing diversity. I've been involved in planning this conference, in membership with the PSF, in discussions about core language development. I've been floating in and out of this community at various levels for a decade. So when I say this is the apex of my professional career, I really mean it. This is pretty incredible. So the problem is that right now, my main emotion is insecurity. There's a voice in the back of my head that's telling me, you don't deserve to be here. Look at the amazing people you shared this stage with. Who are you? What did you do to get up on stage with them? You don't belong in this company. You don't deserve this success. Jay Smooth calls this voice the little hater. Oh man, audio.
Done a video.
Let's try that again.
Ill doctrine is back in effect. I haven't done a video in a long time. There's been a few reasons for that. Reason number one, somehow both my cameras managed to stop working. Reason number two, I was busy with my first ever trip to Los Angeles for this big web video event called the Winnies. Shout out to everybody I met over there. And the other reason I haven't been doing videos for a while is basically I don't always feel like I'm cut out to do this stuff. I'm sure there are some people who wake up every day feeling confident that the entire world wants to look at their face and listen to them talk, but I'm not one of those people. When I'm in the groove of getting work done and I feel like I'm making a connection with you guys out there and my ideas are resonating with you, it feels natural to keep showing up and maintain that connection. But if I go too long without putting work in and it feels like that connection is broken, there's a little voice inside my head that starts playing tricks on me and trying to convince me that the connection was never really there. And I think this is true for all creative people, that we each have a little hater that lives inside our heads and tries to set up traps for us.
Jay is awesome. Everything that he's done is fantastic. So when I hear him talking about his insecurity, I think about my little hater, and my little hater tells me that I don't deserve my success. The really insidious thing about this voice for me is that there's like a little bit of him that's right. And this isn't like a humble brag. I'm not being false modest right now. There are things that I've done that I'm incredibly proud of, and there are things that I've been involved in and things that I've led that I feel do qualify me to be up here. But I don't think that they're the things that you're thinking about. You probably think I'm here because I'm the inventor of Django, right? But that's not actually true. If you know a little more about the story, about how Django came to be, maybe you might know me as the co-creator of Django. That's actually not really true either. The fact is that I was hired to work at the newspaper a year after Adrian and Simon invented and co-created Django. So really, I'm the guy who got hired to work on a thing a year after it was already made. But people still assume that I'm somehow, responsible. And people assume that this is because I'm an incredible programmer, that I'm a rock star, a ninja, or whatever it is that recruiters are calling it these days. And people suspect that I'm successful because of my programming skill. And that's not true. I'm at best an average programmer. So this is Ann Trayson. Ann's probably the most accomplished ultramarathoner in the history of the sport. What's ultra running? Well, ultra running is really any distance over a marathon, over 26 miles. Most of these races are on trails. Most of them involve substantial climbing, technical terrain, crossing streams and rivers. Some of the hardest races can take multiple days of continuous running to complete. The common distances in the sport are 50K, 50 miles, and 100 miles. For those who haven't heard of ultra running, I'll give you a quick FAQ. People really run that far? Yes. Really? Yes. This is a map of the Western States 100. It runs from Squaw Valley in California all the way down to Auburn. Again, 100 miles over a pass, all on trails. Ann won Western States 14 times over about 2 decades. She set dozens of course records across the country in the 80s and 90s, many of which still stand today 10 or 20 years later. In 1994, she set the course record at the Leadville 100. This is a 100-mile race that takes place mostly above 10,000 feet. Breathing up there is like breathing through a straw. Her course record, very few people have come within an hour of her record. It's never even close. That record has stood for 20 years, and no one's come within, within smelling distance of it. It's hard to think about. It's hard to overestimate just how dominant, just how exceptional Ann Trayson was in her sport. So I'm talking about this because as of a few weeks ago, I get to call myself an ultra runner as well. I finished my first 50K. Thank you. So I'm, of course, not even remotely in the same league as someone like Ann Trayson, but I do get to wear the same label. I'm a mediocre runner. I finished 535th out of about 1,000, so pretty much average. Felt pretty good. And the thing that's interesting about this sport is that we can quantify it. We have a lot of numbers that help us figure out how to measure performance. We can talk about pace, we can talk about distance, we can talk about elevation change, the technicality of the terrain. There's a lot of ways that we can account for the skill gap between me and an elite athlete like Ann. There's one site, ultrasignup.com. It's the main site that ultras and trail races use for signing up, creative. They calculate what they call a runner score. So mine's 68%, and what that means is that across all of the races that I've run, I typically finish in about 68% slower than the winner. Right? So the winner score is going to be 100%. Someone who just barely, doesn't win is going to be 99%. I'm down there at like 68%. This actually overstates it a little bit. What's kind of cool about this is you can look at it broken down by distance, and so I can see that my performance falls off as I run farther, which means I got to work on my endurance. So my score is 68%. Ann's is 99.58%, which means that she finishes on average in 99% of the time of the winner. In other words, she usually wins, right? This isn't surprising that there's that much of a gap between me, an average runner, and an elite runner. And if we were to plot a histogram of all the various times and scores, we'd come up with the shape that looks a lot like this. This is should be a familiar shape to anyone who's done any sort of rudimentary statistics. It's a bell curve, otherwise called a normal distribution. So most people are average, and a few people are exceptionally good, and a few people are exceptionally bad under the sort of skinny ends of that curve. This isn't a surprise when we see this pattern. We call it a normal curve because we see it everywhere. Almost every skill that we know how to measure ends up showing a distribution something like this, with most people behaving around in the middle, and a few people exceptionally good, and a few people exceptionally bad. So when I said I was a mediocre programmer, some of you probably didn't believe me. Even though I sort of set it up, even though I led up to it, even though I spoiled the surprise, you probably didn't believe me when I said that. But why? Right? We know that most skill tends to fall into this normal distribution. So most of you, the vast majority of you, have never actually worked with me. Why would you assume that my coding ability is exceptional? Why do you think I'm out there? What is it about what you've heard, what you see, what you think you know, that makes you intuit that I'm under the skinny end? In the absence of any other data, shouldn't you assume that I'm solidly in the middle? Well, part of this is that how do we even measure a coding ability? We are infants in figuring out how to measure our ability to produce software. What are our metrics? Lines of code? What does that measure? Story points? What even is a story point? We'd like to think we work in a field that's very logical and analytical and fact-based. But the truth is we don't have any idea how to talk about what we do in any sort of technical or systematic way. So we do what humans do when we don't have data, and we make up stories. This is a human thing, and we do it. We tell ourselves anecdotes and stories about people's ability to program. And the problem is that these stories are simplistic. This is what we do as human beings. We stereotype, we archetype. And so we say that people suck at programming, and we say that people rock at programming. We don't leave a lot of room for the in-betweens. We bucket everyone we know into an amazing programmer or a worthless use of a seat. And we seem to fall into this assumption that skill in our industry is distributed in like a U-shaped curve. Most people are either on one end of the extreme, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense if you think about it. Like, aren't we learning throughout our career? How would we go from being absolutely terrible to absolutely wonderful without any sort of in-between? But we only tell ourselves these two stories, and so we only allow ourselves two possible narratives. So why did you think that I was under the skinny end? Well, you have two narratives. You have crappy programmers and amazing programmers, and you know that I'm associated with Django, and so the crappy one doesn't seem to fit, and so you pick the good one. Makes sense, right? But we know, again, that if we could measure programming ability, it would look like this. Why? Because most people are average at most things. This is not Lake Wobegon. Most people are not above average. So this assumption that programming falls into this bimodal distribution is dangerous, and it's a myth. And this talent myth sets up a world where you can't program unless you're a rock star or a ninja. And it's actively harmful. This myth is keeping people from programming, it's driving them out of programming, and it's preventing most of the growth and the improvement that we'd like to see. So the US Bureau of Labor Statistics estimates that by 2020, there's going to be a 1.5 million job gap. In other words, there are going to be 1.5 million unfilled programming jobs in the US by 2020. All right, 5 years. The EU has published similar numbers. It's about 1.2 million jobs by 2018, 3 years. So So it's clear from sort of an industry standpoint, we take a really broad view, we have to be doing something to get more people into our industry, right? We sometimes talk about this as the pipeline problem, right? We need to get more people into tech. And the talent myth is a filter on the front of that pipeline that prevents people from even considering getting into this career, into this job, into learning this skill. If we believe that talent is distributed bimodally, it lends very quickly to the belief that you're either born with programming ability or not, that it's an innate attribute, that you have an innate talent or you simply don't. And so somebody who doesn't know how to write software, who believes this myth, will assume, well, you know, I'm 30 or 20 or 15 and I haven't written code yet, so I'm never going to, or 40 or 60. If the only options are to be amazing or terrible, we believe that you have to be passionate about your career. You have to think about programming every waking moment of your life, because if there's only two options, the minute you take your eye off of it, well, you're going to slide right from amazing to terrible again. So we have to always be working in our off hours. We have to be working crazy hours at work. We have to study on our own time, et cetera, et cetera. We don't believe these things about other activities. Last year, over 500,000 people ran a marathon. Did all of them have innate talent? I doubt it. I didn't. I didn't start running until I was 25. Most of them, like me, ran this marathon rather badly. A few people out front ran it very, very fast, and all of these people, pretty slowly. We don't believe you have to be passionate about running. All that it takes is a pair of shoes. We don't even believe you have to particularly like it. How many runners do you know that kind of hate it? Someone asked me one time what the best part about running the 50K was, and I told them it was finishing. Running a marathon is really hard, right? It's 26 miles. It takes sometimes years of training, thousands of miles. It requires commitment and focus. Do you think that writing software, that writing Python is harder than running a marathon? So why aren't there 500,000 people here today? Why do we tell ourselves such different stories about one skill, coding, and another skill, running? I want to tell you a little story about what these narratives do to individuals. A couple years ago, I was at Kansas University's GIS Day. GIS Day are these one-day GIS, Geographic Information Systems, events held at universities all around the world. And I love going to KUs. It's always really exciting, really interesting. I'm a total dabbler in GIS, but it's great seeing professionals talk about it. And each year in the afternoon, students give presentations about their projects. And these are technically detailed, really interesting talks about original research. Any one of those talks could be a session here at Pycon, and you'd all think it was one of the best on the schedule. So why aren't these speakers here? Well, one student a few years ago gave a particularly fantastic presentation. It was about predicting seasonal floods on the Kansas River using a combination of historical data and flow analysis and rainfall data and those sorts of things. And the tools that she used should be pretty familiar to a lot of people in the room. She used Amazon Web Services, Linux, PostgreSQL, Python, Django, GeoDjango. I was hiring Python developers, and she had just written thousands of lines of Python code, and so I asked her if she wanted to interview with us. And she said, oh, no, I can't do that. She said, I'm not really a programmer. This is a woman who had just invented her own cluster distributed geographic information systems processing data pipeline. But she's not really a programmer. Because programming is something you are in this myth, not something you do. Well, the truth is that programming isn't passion, it isn't a talent. It's just like some things that you can learn. It's not even one thing. I've been talking about programming as if it were a single thing, but that's not actually true. Alex Gaynor, when he was reading a draft of this, pointed out to me that software development requires all sorts of skills. Coding is just like one small part of it. We need design, we need communication, we need writing, we need debugging. We need to have at least one person who understands Unicode. There are multiple independent skills, and when we assume that they're all required to be a programmer, we assume that a person is the minimum of their parts. Sure, you might be able to design well and speak well and write well, and you're a great project manager, but you don't know how a linked list works, so get out of the building. Like any skill, you can do any of these skills professionally or occasionally. You can do them as a hobby, or as a part-time job, as a full-time job. You can do them badly, you can do them well, or most likely, you can do them average. If we embrace this idea that it's cool to be okay at these skills, that being average is fine, it'll be less intimidating for newcomers. If we set the bar for success at okay rather than at exceptional, that bar seems a lot easier to clear for people new to our community. Even once we get people in, the talent myth haunts people who are already in our community, and it actively drives people out of tech. This is the part of a talk that's a little bit of a downer, but we have to acknowledge it. The tech industry is rife with sexism, racism, homophobia, and discrimination. This problem is complex and multifaceted. There isn't one cause, but the talent myth is one of them, and it contributes to these. In our industry, we recast the talent myth as the myth of the brilliant asshole, right? The 10x programmer who's so good at his job that people have to work with him. He has such great output that, yeah, he's a jerk, but we still have to work with him anyway. The argument goes that we need this output, and so the toxic behavior is acceptable. Now, in reality, we know that skill is normally distributed, so it's likely that these people aren't actually exceptional. But even if we grant that they are, how many developers does a 10x programmer have to drive away before it's a wash? More insidiously, this idea that programmers fall into either sucks or rocks categories gives us dangerous bias. So I want you to answer this question: what does a 10x programmer look like? We probably thought of someone like this. This is Mark Zuckerberg, a young white man, because that's who we've seen on the media. Don't spoil it. That's who we've seen on the media in tech company mastheads, and so on and so forth. But that's not actually Mark Zuckerberg. That's what people are laughing about. That's Jesse Eisenberg, who played Mark Zuckerberg in a major motion picture about a young white man founding a tech company. That's Mark Zuckerberg. Sorry, that's not Mark Zuckerberg. That's Andy Samberg. Andy Samberg is an actor on Saturday Night Live who played Jesse Eisenberg playing Mark Zuckerberg. I think that's Mark Zuckerberg. Okay, so I'm trying to be funny here, and I guess for some of you I succeeded. But there's a point here, right? This young white man archetype is so common that we need 3 people to play the same person. Which ones? Anyway, so this means when we see someone who doesn't fit that stereotype, it doesn't look like these 3 men, we assume that they're not a real programmer, because that's what a real programmer looks like. Almost all the women in this industry I know have a story about somebody assuming that they're not actually a programmer. I've talked with multiple women here at Pycon this year who have been asked which guy they're here with. The only reason they would come is because their partner, the man, is the programmer. If you're a dude, has anyone ever asked you that? On the other hand, when you saw me get up on stage, I do look like those guys, so you probably assumed I was a real programmer. These sorts of assumptions about what makes a real programmer contribute to the attrition of marginalized people in tech. All these numbers come from NCWIT. I'm going to forget the acronym, so you can Google it. They do a report on the state of women in technology. National Center for Women in Technology, I think that's it. Half of women with CS degrees are not employed in industries using those degrees. 40% of women leave technology within 10 years, compared to 17% of men. Over half of women leave the industry at the midpoint of their careers. Now, there's certainly other causes. I don't want to imply that this is a problem with only one root cause. But imagine how frustrating it has to be a woman with a decade of experience and have someone assume that you don't know what you're talking about. It's going to take serious effort to fix our diversity problem. We're never going to get there, though. We're never going to solve this problem if we can't figure out a more nuanced way to think about what a programmer really is and what programming skills really are. There are all kinds of runners, sprinters and distance runners and marathoners and ultramarathoners and people who run on the weekends and people who run every day and people who run professionally and those who are dilettantes. There are runners of all sizes and shapes and genders and ages and races. And all of them have different metrics for success, and all of them are capable of being successful by their own metrics. And we have got to find such a nuanced, shaded, interesting way of thinking about skill in tech. I want to close with one more story. This talk started as a conversation I had with Lynn Root at Pycon some years ago, and it planted the germ of an idea in my head that grew into this topic and eventually this talk. Lynn is a programmer. She's the founder of the San Francisco chapter of PyLadies. She was one of last night's auctioneers. She's a PSF board member, and she's been in and around this community for a while. At the time, PyLadies was relatively new, and I was excited about just the energy and the excitement and the people and the skills that that group was bringing into the industry. And I said to Lynn something along the lines of, it's so great to see all of these badass women programmers. And Lynn said, yes, that's true, but we'll know we've been really successful when there are a whole bunch of average women programmers. The myths we tell ourselves about talent in programming sets an impossibly high bar for entry. The fact that any of us are here at all is kind of shocking, given this myth. We need to dismantle it. We need to build a community where we recognize that average is actually pretty awesome. So I am a mediocre programmer, and I would like to invite you to join me, and together we can do our jobs perfectly adequately. Should I? Okay. All right, thank you. So I can take questions, a few of them. Before we do, just an observation about questions that I've seen throughout this week. There's been a pattern of people who get up and use the time not to ask a question, but to share their opinion or to pontificate on what the speaker has said. I am very personally interested in that, and I would like to personally hear that type of feedback, and I invite you to email it to me or tweet it at me. But my experience sitting in the audience during those types of non-questions is frustration and anger. And so I'd like to please ask people to ask questions.
Thank you very much for this amazing talk, and I think it's really helpful. And I would like to get your opinion about another community you are involved in, and that I would like to know if you know some average security expert, and how average people, like if security is also an applicable field for average people, or is that like reserved to Ninja and Rockstar?
So if we think we have this problem in the programming community, you don't know the security community. There's a reason that I attend and speak at programming conferences and not security conferences. It's even worse. Yes, that problem exists in that community, and yes, there are plenty of perfectly average security people as well, but they tell themselves this myth to an even higher degree, and it is even more difficult for people entering those communities. I wish that I could give this talk at a security conference, but they probably wouldn't have it.
So I am also a mediocre programmer. And
Hi.
I'm wondering how you think the idea of expertise or depth intersects with this dimension of full stack or breadth. Because there's also this expectation of not only are you expert or not, but you're generalist or specialist. How do those combine in good or bad ways?
Yeah, I mean that's part of the myth, right? That you have to be both broad and deep, which you have to know everything about everything. Is that really possible? Yeah, I think this is again one of these situations where we need a more nuanced understanding of skill. Some people. So I'll brag a little bit. Like the thing that I'm good at is knowing a little bit about a lot of things. I'm not very good at going deep. I'm not very good at understanding lots of things, but or understanding the details of a thing, but I'm very good at understanding a lot of little pieces. And we need to understand that itself is a skill along with people who go on the other axis who really want to get super deep the other way. I mean, these are both complementary, right? If you're looking organizationally, you kind of want both of those types of expertise, right? So I think that's part of that myth that we have to somehow impossibly know everything about everything.
Hi, thanks for your talk. Obviously, it's something I've put a lot of thought into myself. I'm wondering, people in this room are probably aware of this problem, particularly because the Python community is good about talking about it. But what is it that we can do to help get rid of this myth back at our workplaces so that recruiters and venture capitalists and the people who are actually determining who gets brought into the community, those first threshold are actually going to be aware that this is something that's going on?
Whew. I think that's an incredibly difficult question, and there's probably about 30 answers. I'll give the first one that comes to mind. I think there's more than this. So I think a lot about work-life balance. I think a lot about the idea of the 40-hour or the 35-hour work week, because we seem to think, and I think it's related to these myths, that we need to be working these crazy 60-hour weeks. And I think that's not true. I think that's part of our, thank you. I think that's related to this myth, and I think one thing that we can do, especially those of us who do have a lot of privilege, who are well employed, who do have a 1.5 million person skill gap out there, is if our companies don't respect the idea of work-life balance and don't respect the idea that doing your job, that we should be able to do our jobs well, adequately, we should be able to deliver to expectations, and that should be commended, and that working a healthy schedule should be commended. And I think it's endemic on us with the privilege to do so, to push our organizations to recognize and allow that to flourish.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Pamela, and I'm a mediocre programmer as well.
Hi.
Hi. Kind of the other side of that question, how do we get people who are mediocre programmers to get the courage to apply when we have a job opening? Yeah,
see, I wish I knew the answer to that. I am personally hiring an intern this summer for the first time, and I'm terrified because I don't know what to do to create a healthy environment for someone just entering it. I think I know, but I'm terrified that I don't, and that that I'm experimenting on somebody's career here. So if you have suggestions for me, please let me know.
Thanks.
Can we just let everyone know to go downstairs? It's the job fair right now and poster session.
Yes. All right. Thank you all again. Everyone, the next things are downstairs in what was formerly the expo hall. It's now the job fair and the poster session. So thanks again, and have a good rest of your day.